So I have a question.
Okay, 1, 2. I don't know who was first here. Okay, you second and third. You can go out right.
De facto, literacy was discussed. I mean, how does that tie into political and social development of the country? Is it possible that maybe some countries need to have some development in context with literacy development? I mean, how is that addressed against the Millennium Goals, and what are some possible solutions? Because I mean, it occurred to me before I came here that some people could want to be good and then just not use it, really to its skills. And how is that problem tackled?
Well, one of the things you see is that in the United States, I'll talk really loud. Teacher voice. Some countries are just extremely, extremely poor. And growing up in the United States, it's hard to even imagine how poor some countries are, how poor some governments are. And so often it's not like the government's bad or they don't want people to be literacy. They can't even feed their people. There's Somalia famine raging and thousands of people dying. And so a lot of literacy really is tied up with the very, very basic development, economic development of a country, and the control of their resources, the control of their markets, the control of their wealth. And I think sometimes we think, oh, we want to blame some person for this, when it's really a national problem in some parts of the world, where a country has to get, you have to have enough surplus to even to have schools, to run schools. In Haiti right now, there's lots of communities that don't have electricity other than 1 or 2 hours a day. So it's hard to run a school, a hospital, whatever, if you don't even have enough money to have electricity. So I think that it's really, really intimately tied to general development around the world. And when we look at what's happening around the world, the Arab Spring and things going on in different countries, that's going to affect literacy as people have more democracy, more say in what they're able to do. So often, I guess the point I'm trying to make is that you can't just say, bad country, you don't want your people to be literate, when it's Somalia. People in Somalia want to be literate, they first have to be able to eat.
I was just going to add on what Dr. Burton just said. From my experience, I remember it was in Ethiopia. So I remember a certain group come with, let's say, pencil and books, and they give it to me, okay? Then this group of WFP, World Food Program, would give this. Of course, I get so mad at those people who are giving me a pencil while I don't know if I'm going to make it tomorrow night. So the thing in my mind is, please, I understand your concern, but give me food right now. So it depends on the priority. And that time, it's stability and this, but then later on, once I know I will eat today, I might just think to come and to class. And so I was like, what are they thinking? Why are they giving me this and I'm starving? So it depends on each country and what situation. Like he was saying, 700,000 people are expected literally to die in Somalia. So if I'm going here and I'm saying literacy, do you think they would listen to me? No. And I'm nuts even to think about that because they want food. So.
And I just want to add to that, because I think we can bring these examples locally to what's happening to communities outside of Gainesville typically, but that work and live 30, 40, 50 miles from here. They're very commutable. And we're at a very rich, big institution. We have tremendous amounts of language and literacy resources here. And so when we go, for example, on September 21st, we're starting adult ESL classes in Levy County that will be held in one of the churches to try and build relationships between schools and churches and immigrant Latino families. And we can go ahead and bring these resources to the community, but the fact of the matter is that we have families that don't have access to transportation in rural communities, and I think transportation is a theme that we even face here in rural settings. They don't have transportation, They certainly don't have excess amounts of money, so that if, for example, if it's a late evening and they need to pick a crop, then they're going to stay on the fields and pick crops. And so it becomes a priority. They need to feed families. They need to get there. They need to pay for gas at $4 a gallon. The children have other activities. So it depends. We can create those programs and services, but I think the issues we have to I think prioritize what's important for people to get there. But secondly, we have to bring literacy, in my mind, in my experience, is bring these services to people directly to where they are and not expect them to come in and just look for them and seek them, because they need resources in their communities, in the context of their lives and what works for them. So I don't know, it's different in Bronson than it is even in Chiefland, than it is even in Yankeetown. There's a whole different groups of people out there. But I think that if we respond to the needs of people in their communities and build the literacy gap around the needs for literacy within that community, I think we'd be more successful in attaining literacy, at least some of those numbers.
You were discussing about a different definition of literacy. When a developing country is implementing a literacy program, what kind of literacy do they have in mind? Do they have this redefinition of literacy, or the literacy which was already there? Like literacy, the thing to read.
Right. I think that's a great question, because we're problematizing what is literacy. And literacy, as it's being measured sometimes, and I'm always a little hesitant, as an educator. We're always measuring kids, we're measuring teacher quality. I saw teacher quality there, and I thought, oh no, I hope we're not going to talk about teacher quality. But that's a whole other thing. But how do we know it when we see it? What does literate mean? 3rd grade level, 5th grade level? A newspaper is supposed to be set at 6th grade literacy level, and frankly, I think the newspaper can be pretty high. It's pretty hard to do that. Bring it into my adult classes, and it's very difficult to decode. But literacy. So the question is, how do we know it when we see it, and how do we measure it? And we have all kinds of non-traditional literacies. Right now, I think that, and there are people that do research and believe that literacy is just interacting in the standard form of a language with text, and that's it, and that keeps it simple. But the fact of the matter is, like Dr. Burns pointed out, that people are highly literate in using cell phones to communicate in non-traditional forms of language, and fills their needs and fits the purposes for communication, in addition to computer literacies and numeracy, abilities to interact with numbers and count. So it is a more complex issue. I think the question is, why do we want to, whose idea of literacy is it, and how do we measure it? Why do we want to know those numbers? And I think those numbers might actually look differently if we were measuring or looking at literacy from different perspectives, and principally from the perspective of the needs of the community. I think there are literate communities that function. And I believe wholeheartedly in Paulo Freire's work that literacy in and of itself is a tool for fighting oppressive relationships. So I'm not denying that, but I'm also saying that there are other kinds of literacies that we need to pay attention to in the 21st century.
But a lot of the literacy programs are driven by the donors, like the Millennium Goals. So there's money behind them, and so they're making the game. They're setting the rules of the game. And so in some ways, it's extremely hard for countries, and the example of Actenamita, Guatemala, they had to fight the Guatemalan government, all kinds of people to create their program, because it doesn't fit nicely to the Millennium Goals. And so unfortunately, large-scale donors really do set expectations. And so I think part of our work, and part of us that work in this area, we're working at the community level, but we also want to talk to Bill Gates. We want to get those donors on the right track.
So you're like saying that there is disparity among the donation which goes to a different set of countries. Right? Some countries get the attention of the donors, and some countries haven't got attention.